We're going to talk briefly about the timelines for federal aid, recommended by Federal Student Aid, which is the government site in which the FAFSA is from. So for our juniors who are about to kind of dive into their senior year, the work starts now, or has started this whole year, even though it's been a little weird. This spring is when you start registering for those college admission exams. And while we don't exactly know what colleges are going to require this year, a lot of them dropped requirements for the SAT or ACT. We do recommend still registering for an SAT slot, practicing taking it, so that you have that score in case a college that you are interested in attending is requiring it next year. To begin the scholarship search, we've talked about this a little bit in our meetings, given the students some of the recommendations for online searches, but this is really going to kind of turn into a part-time job over the summer, and anything that they can apply to now in 10th or 11th grade will help alleviate some of that pressure over the summer. We will be continuing to explore colleges. We encourage students to do that outside of next gen date meetings as well. So if they're exploring them virtually, at some point, hopefully they can get on campus before accepting, as well as through interviews of people who went there. So we've had a couple folks come in from a variety of different campuses around Maryland and Pennsylvania to talk about their experiences and what the schools have to offer. That is a great way for students also to get kind of a firsthand account of what that school could potentially be providing for them. Review financial situation. So parents, we do want you to start talking about how school will be funded in the future. I think sometimes it's back of the brain assumption for students that you're going to be paying for college, which is generally not the option. So making sure that you're upfront with them about how you're going to finance, why scholarships are so important, and the variety of other opportunities that we're going to talk about today. When we come to the fall of senior year, so this fall, we are going to have our seniors then, narrow down 3 to 5 colleges that they're going to be applying to. These are the 3 to 5 colleges that they are going to put on to their FAFSA, which is the free financial aid application that all schools require for federal aid and state aid. You're gonna be very organized this fall, seniors. You're going to make a list of everywhere that you apply, what they require, any deadlines, and at some point, the financial aid packages that they are able to offer you. It will be making choosing a college much easier in the spring. Then you're going to apply, and we will work through applications together, college access programs at school, as well as your school counselor or other people who will help you apply to colleges, and continuing those scholarship applications, making sure that you are not leaving the summer before you go to college where you're trying to get as much money scraped together as possible and you're so stressed out. We don't want that to happen. So making sure you're reminding your students to continue searching for those scholarship applications. Spring of the senior year, visiting those colleges that have accepted you, making sure that you are narrowing down the one that you're going to enroll with. Compare those financial aid offers. Some may give you higher financial aid packages, which would be great and may kind of sway you in one direction or another. And then you're going to notify that school its deadline. Next up, we're going to move on to our sophomores. We'll just kind of breeze through this one, making sure that you're talking to your school counselor so that you know where you're at academic standing wise, that your parents know where you're at, and what you need to do in order to accomplish your goals before graduation. So checking those GPAs, your course load, making sure you're achieving all the credits that you need in order to graduate through Baltimore City, but also to get into the schools that you're interested in. You're going to continue exploring your career interests and colleges, just Pick something that your friend went to and explore what they have to offer. Ask them about it. Ask about what else they applied to. Making sure that you are just having fun by seeing what's out there and that you don't feel pigeonholed into one college or one program just because someone said you have to. Planning summer work wisely. This is something that we're going to really focus on for all of our scholars, making sure that you're doing some sort of volunteer work, summer course, camp, something that you can put and add on your resume, your application, some sort of experience. Reviewing your educational goals with your parents and family, we really encourage our scholars to make sure that they're sharing with you what they'd like to do, even if it's ever evolving, making sure that they're, sharing what their dreams and aspirations are. The fall of their junior year, so this fall, continuing to explore those career and college opportunities, taking the PSAT, which is usually facilitated by the school, and can offer scholarships if you score highly. It is kind of a practice SAT that you get some cool information back, kind of feedback from. Spring of the junior year, we are going to schedule those entrance exams as well as begin the scholarship search, reviewing that financial situation with your family and narrowing down those college options, those things that we just talked about for juniors. All right, Julia, you want to take it from here?
Sure. Hold on, let me make sure I am good. So financial aid in common terms and definitions. So as you all know, college is not necessarily a cheap thing. It's pretty expensive. And so a lot of folks usually rely on financial aid to pay for their education. So what exactly is financial aid? Well, it is money to help pay for your college experience, or it can be trade school, a 2 to 4 year college, university, and beyond. So this money can come from multiple sources. So it can be from the government, it can be from the school itself, it can be from private foundations and organizations, employment. It can be from, of course, other companies. So just like different ways or different sources for you to pay for college. Next slide. All right, so the differences in aid. So there are different types. So there's need-based and then there's merit-based. So needs-based is money that is given to students when their family cannot afford to pay the full price of college. And let's just be honest, most families aren't. So need-based aid may come in the form of grants or scholarships. But what usually happens is that people get loans with a lower interest rate. So as I'm sure everyone has heard about school loans, that is definitely what a need-based aid is. For merit-based, this is money that is awarded without any kind of regard to financial need. It can be usually based on academic achievement, artistic abilities, leadership skills, other kind of characteristics that will allow your student to gain money. And yeah, so just like a merit-based situation. Next slide. So loans versus grants. We've talked to actually some of the students about this as we've kind of discussed more about financial aid this year. So loan versus grant. A loan is a sum of money borrowed to finance post-secondary education or higher ed-related expenses. Education loans are intended to cover the cost of usually tuition, books and supplies, and living expenses, especially if they are going out of state. Or moving a little bit more further from home. And so while the borrower is in the process of pursuing the degree, they are using those loans to cover their expenses. Grants, you do not have to pay back. So grants are generally based on financial need, but they're the biggest thing that you do not have to pay grants back. If you have any questions, I think Leah is looking at those in the chat. So next slide. So one of the cool things about being a part of Next Generation Scholars is that all of the students who are in our program are eligible to receive the Guaranteed Access Grant or the GA grants. So you're eligible for high school seniors who complete a college prep program, and it usually is need-based. It's a renewable grant up to $19,400, which is a really beautiful chunk of change for college. And it's definitely intended for folks who intend to stay in a 2 or 4 year school. And the only thing is they must have a 2.5 GPA by their senior year, and their parents must meet income requirements. I know one of the things I'm not sure if we're doing it today, but we do intend as we get closer, particularly for our juniors, making sure they know what those income requirements actually are, so their parents can start getting that information together. And then for sophomores, it is definitely a beautiful time to start thinking about what those income requirements are, not just for the Guaranteed Access Grant, but for other grants as well.
I am just looking for this real quick. I'm gonna pop it in the chat. For any of you who are interested in learning more about the Guaranteed Access Grants and finding those income requirements, you can see the link in the chat.
Awesome.
And there we go.
All right. So cost of attendance. So cost of attendance, the average is the total price of going to a particular college. That includes your fees, your tuition, your room and your board, your books, your supplies, your meal plan, and other living expenses, usually like transportation. Sometimes some colleges add on like a technology fee. That's usually all included in your cost of attendance. So the average cost of attending a year for your community college is $10,000 per year. You can find things that are lower, but that's kind of like the basis. And then the average cost of attendance for a 4-year institution is $25,000 a year. So of course, if you're going out of state, you can add some more money to that $25,000. So just to kind of get in your head how much college actually is. We've spoken to students about this more. I think that maybe in their 11th grade and 12th grade year, they start realizing maybe how much school is, but we want to make sure that you all as parents and guardians, you guys are also understanding like how much money it actually is and that you guys are prepared. Next slide. Okay, so expected family contribution. So that's the formula that's based on the income, assets, and the family size, and it estimates how much of a college's price tag you can, in theory at least, afford to pay. So essentially, how much money can you put towards the tuition price? So this number often implies families can pay for more college expenses than they actually are able to. And this is why students sometimes they need to supplement federal awards with additional grants and scholarships, which is why we tell students in Next Gen I think one of our last meetings, really kind of starting to figure out what their gifts are, what are some of their talents, so they can start to figure out how much money they're actually going to need to almost like piecemeal together to pay for tuition. And if they're thinking about going out of state, definitely thinking about what that looks like. If there are any questions, you can put them in the chat or say them out loud. All right. Okay. Demonstrated need, the difference between your expected family contribution, the FAFSA, and so we'll discuss FAFSA in a bit, and the total cost of attendance. So so the difference in what is demonstrated for how much you actually need for college, and then like the total cost of attendance. That's kind of a split thing. And then the beautiful FAFSA. So I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with the FAFSA. It is something that everyone talks about, especially as you get closer to talk about college. So FAFSA is the free application for federal student aid. It's a form that you complete every year, every academic year, and it's usually completed by the current prospective college student in the U.S. to determine the eligibility for student financial aid. That financial aid also kind of includes it's like how much money you can like Pell Grants, and also like work study questions are on the FAFSA. So all of that is on there. The FAFSA data determines your federal aid eligibility, and many states use this information to also award their own aid, like the Guaranteed Access Grant. So the FAFSA opens up in October every single year. It needs to be filled out the fall and winter of the senior year. So that means coming up in October 2021, this year, the FAFSA is going to open up, and you're going to go to the website, and it's going to, or you might get a message from us, and you'll say, hey, it's open, and it's time for you to fill it out. Excuse me. Parents and scholars will both be required to complete sections of the document, and most of the information required will be from 2 years ago. Students going to college, this fall, they're required to submit tax information from 2019. So making sure you have your tax info is going to be important. Students' income, family size, where they're graduating from, where they're applying to, that's the kind of information. You want to make sure you're sending it out to multiple colleges and universities, because anyone that you're applying to, so I think Leah had mentioned, we're going to have them choosing 3 to 5 schools that they definitely want to apply to. That is going to be like where that FAFSA information goes to. So you'll get some information about that. Family, tax return from prior years is going to be important. Family size and situations, assets. I just actually completed the FAFSA for my master's program, and yeah, they asked for a bunch of information. And if you have not or will not be filing a tax return in the year requested, you can connect with one of us, Leah or myself, to kind of talk about next steps. The good thing about doing this early is that it's first come, first served. So making sure you fill it out as soon as possible, so you get essentially the most bang for your buck, as they would say. It is a free service. So if someone's saying it costs you money to fill out, or if there's someone that you can pay me to fill it out for you, you don't need to actually do that. You should never have to pay to complete it. It's a free form. So just making sure that you have all your stuff together so you are ready for the FAFSA. Are there any questions? All right, so just make sure for juniors, like, this is coming up very soon, in a very short months. It'll be here. It'll be October, and you'll be in your senior year. So parents, just making sure that you are kind of gathering information. You are having those conversations with your student, just about like, what are you thinking about for college? Is it going to be in state? Are you doing out of state? And filling this out as soon as possible.
The FAFSA is often something that is like kind of dangles over senior year as this big scary thing. Mm-hmm. And what we want to do is just simplify it and kind of get ahead of it, because talking about taxes, especially with your students, with your children, can be kind of an uncomfortable experience. And while there are 2 separate applications, there is a little bit of crossover. So just making sure that you're prepared, your students prepared, and then if you foresee any issues coming up or want to learn more about it, this is not the end of the conversation, and we will be with you through October, and the faster you get filled out, the better. So we're aiming for October.
Yep. And this is a really good time to use to kind of learn more about it and be more comfortable with it, because I mentioned you and the student will have to do this every single year. So, I just filled out my FAFSA for the 2021-2022 school year. So it opened up technically like last October. So you're still, you're doing this every academic year. So the more you do it, the more information you have, the easier it actually becomes to complete. And it's not as intimidating as it actually seems. Are you doing scholarships, Leah, or am I? Okay.
I can do it.
So, okay, go ahead.
So we have just talked about grants, which is money that you do not have to pay back. And very, very often you get grants from the government, so state or federal grants. Another way to get money, free money that does not have to be repaid, are through scholarships. And kind of through that merit or that need-based lens, scholarships come in a variety of different characteristics. Anything from being the top of your class to being left-handed to playing a sport really well. You can get a wide variety of scholarships, but the unfortunate thing is that you have to generally find them. So we do have a big long list of where you can find scholarships, where your students can find scholarships. We will take time this summer to kind of sit with our juniors and make sure that we're proofreading essays for scholarships and making a plan on when you can submit them and when you're going to hear back, and kind of creating that financial package so that you know that you can pay for college. So that is something that we will be working with our juniors about, but keeping in mind that it is never too early to apply for scholarships. We have ninth grade scholarships that we've already been kind of pushing out to our one ninth grader, as well as our 10th graders. We've encouraged them to start making sure that you have that understanding about how much school is and how much that cost of attendance is going to be. So it's not just tuition. It is also if you're going to live on campus, if you're going to get a meal plan, are books and tuition, or are they separate? Because that's another $500 per semester. So making sure that you are kind of having those conversations with your children about how much those like little extras are and how much scholarships you can receive in order to cover all of those expenses. Something to really think about are school counselors. Great place to start for scholarships. If kind of searching them online feels overwhelming, encourage them to talk their plans out with their school counselors, and they will receive a load of scholarships that they can apply to, because that is the main place where those are funneled to in the school. A reminder to students as well, don't need straight A's or college courses to receive scholarships, but it can help. The better your grades, the better chance that you're going to find those merit-based scholarships. But also keeping in mind that if you get a B in an advanced class or a scholarship class, because it's more rigorous, it still looks good because you attempted that class and still are doing fairly well in it. Folks like the idea of quality versus quantity. So that goes for community service as well as classwork. You don't need to do 1 million things. You don't have to have your student in an activity every quarter for their entire high school career. If they're able to do just a couple things and really kind of hammer home that commitment and leadership that it takes to do those things, it's going to look really good on a scholarship or a college application. Next gen, we are really pushing, and we'll talk a little bit about summer plans in a minute, but we are really pushing any type of kind of proactive summer experience. And that could be work, internship, volunteering, taking classes, either like remedial, so you're recovering those credits from this really challenging year, or advanced classes. Anything that you can put on your resume and write about in some sort of application narrative. Lastly, work study. Work study is federally granted money in which students are allocated a certain number of hours that they can work and get paid on campus, which is a really cool opportunity because students are still building that resume, building those work skills, but also generally a lot more flexible around classes. You're getting paid generally minimum wage to work in an office or help grade papers, some cool skills to get paid for that you may not have the opportunity to do at other times in your life. So making sure that when you fill out that FAFSA, there's a button that says interested in work study. Say yes or not sure. Don't necessarily just say no, because you can always choose not to accept it later. Any questions about those different types of financial aid? So we've covered grants, we've covered scholarships. Thank you. Awesome. Okay, what we're not going to cover today is loans, because our hope is that with everyone preparing in their 10th and 11th grade, you can receive enough scholarship grant money in order to not have to take out loans, at least for their first year. We will talk about loans as we get closer to applications and financial aid award letters, but at this point, there's still enough time. Team no loans, that's what we're going to aim for.
Please.
Oops.
Fun.
So at this point, we have kind of moved past the financial aid 101, just kind of a deep dive into all the things that are going to be thrown at our 11th graders in their upcoming senior year. We want, again, to open this conversation up to any questions now, but also in the future as things start kind of ramping up, potentially going back into buildings, potentially being able to do a bunch of in-person stuff this summer. It might be a little harder to kind of sit down and take a minute to kind of hammer out some of these details. So if you do have any questions or have questions in the future, do not hesitate to reach out. Julia, you want to pop into second semester?
Yes. So, second semester, we have some interesting things possibly on the horizon. So the potential of re-entering schools. I would love to hear from parents just about how they're feeling about that. Right now, I know that the governor, the president, and Dr. Santa Lisa is talking. They're talking about hopefully getting teachers and students back in March. Another thing that we have coming up, obviously, is tutoring for students. As we know, because of COVID, this year has been very difficult and very trying. Just like, of course, with the pandemic itself, but also just kind of the switch to virtual learning. So if your students, have bad grades, or they have middle of the road grades, or even if they have good grades, signing them up for tutoring is going to be an important thing to make sure that they are getting the best support they need for classes, as well as we were just talking about that 2.5 GPA, kind of getting them to that. We understand that this year has been, like I said, very difficult. And so certain students who normally might do very, very well in person, maybe are having a little bit of hard time getting used to a virtual setting. And I'm just going to say, of course, I don't think that the amount of time we've been at home is really the same as really getting acclimated to what it means to learn virtually. So we do have tutoring, Crown tutoring, for kids. So if they want to get signed up, we talked to them about this as well. They can reach out to us and we can make sure we send that information to you all as well. And then, of course, summer planning is a really good time, not just to talk about and think about financial aid, but also to get some of those leadership and kind of job opportunities and skill building opportunities during the summer to make some money based off of how everything is going with the vaccine, as well as just like things seeming to open up. I'm not really sure. So that could be either virtually or in person. The YouthWorks application, I think, opened up earlier this week. So if your student is interested in doing YouthWorks again or for the first time, it's a really good time for them to start their application so that they opened up. So summer planning expectations, we want all the students to have internships, something that they're doing that is going to, of course, like open up their mind and give them a different and new experience. YouthWorks, obviously, just talked about that. If they're getting jobs this summer, even more amazing. Social justice apprenticeships, recovery credit. So if there's anything that your student maybe didn't do well, if they need to do a recovery credit, this is the time to kind of get that done from the past year or past years. College courses, if your student is taking college courses, obviously we want to hear about that and make sure they're like signed up and they're ready for that. Professional development, camps, and training. These are all options that are open for this summer. So I'm not sure if you all have had any conversations with your child about like what your expectations are for them this summer. Do you want them getting jobs? Do you want them taking college courses or training? Are there tests they need to make up that maybe they didn't do too well in last semester or previous semester? Just kind of wanted to hear from you all about like, what are your expectations? And if there are any expectations, what are they and how can we help? How can we and I help?